Alright, welcome back to the stream, folks. I'm a little more in the dark than usual here to reduce the glare on the screen. I guess it makes it look a little spooky though, which might be useful this weekend. So I've got this script which is basically working. Builds a disk image that this old voting machine will boot Linux off of. I was trying to make the user space a little more usable. I just tried adding a few things in here. I was trying to get the graphics driver working. Ran into a couple of problems with that. One is that once my disk image gets above 48 megs, I start hitting a limit that I wasn't aware of, so we've got to go fix that at some point. Also, I don't know that this compiled version of the video driver actually has support for ISA bus at all. It might be PCI only. So that needs investigation. But we got this whole computer. Look at that, like 30 megs free on the disk. Oh yeah, there was a question in chat about what turned out to be the issue that was keeping it from booting. This right here is the fix. I ended up needing to patch grub to remove some code which was trying to disable PAE mode, which is a processor feature for supporting more than 4 gigs of RAM. It was just causing a fault during the low-level relocator code in grub. And grub didn't have any compile options or anything to remove that, so I just have a little patch in here that's just deleting those lines of code. Yeah, these two sections of code were crashing the machine and causing it to reboot all the way back into BIOS, where it would then fail to post. I don't know what's about the failing to post also, because theoretically the machine should have just rebooted at that point, but it didn't actually reboot. It crashed, and in some cases wiped its CMOS memory, and in some cases just failed to boot and beeped a bunch of times. So I'm guessing that there's something going on where, either due to a BIOS bug or a silicon bug, the system doesn't actually fully reset properly when it's supposed to reboot. So yeah, grub seems to work now. I think maybe the next thing I'll do is put those Xorg packages back in here, which will probably break my file system, and I'll have to go debug grub again. Grub was complaining because I was asking it to read past where BIOS thought the end of the disk was, which is surprising to me because I wasn't expecting grub to care where BIOS thought the end of the disk was, and incidentally it's not correct on this system. So I need to figure out how to make grub not care about that either, via configuration option or patching. But yeah, this is cool. It's been a while since I've seen CMatrix run this slow on a machine, but it's kind of nice effect. Yeah, 31.9 BOGO MIPS. And I did actually bump it up to the latest kernel, so we're on 5.14.15. What we got? Oh yeah, I did install Minicom, so it's a little easier to mess with the serial ports now. And I looked into how to use the touchscreen driver. So Linux does have a driver in the kernel for this touchscreen. I'm not sure if we have the right user space tool to enable it though. So the driver is called DynaPro, I think. But in the source code, they tell you to use this tool input attach to set it up in user space, which is apparently the same mechanism that you'd use to attach like a serial mouse. So it's a way to tell Linux to use a particular device on an input bus that is not hot plug native like serial ports. But I don't actually see the device here. There's one that seemed like it might be it. There's one labeled 3M MicroTouch. So this is the one we have is also by 3M, but it's called DynaPro. And that driver did not seem to work, but needs a closer look to see what's actually wrong. But I can just use Minicom to look at the port. So yeah, I've already got that set the right baud rate. It's 2400 baud, no flow control. So yeah, it seems to be touchscreening. Okay, this image built. Hope everyone's having a good Saturday. Alright, I'm going to rewrite this card. So I learned something about 16-bit Ethernet cards, or 16-bit PCMCIA cards at least. The cards themselves go for about $5, and the dongles are expensive. It seems like something we could rebuild, right? Like the most the dongle would have in it is the magnetics. I imagine they don't actually have room for a transformer in the card itself. You know, maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe it's like a whole transceiver or something. I wasn't super confident that I could build my own dongle, so I did find someone on eBay selling like refurbished cards that had the dongle, and it was like $40 instead of $6. But if that works out, I might be able to get 10 base T Ethernet on here, which seems like it would actually be worthwhile at this point. I think 10 base T is probably the sweet spot. Like, I don't imagine more bandwidth would actually be useful given the CPU speed. And although you can find, I think, some 16-bit fast Ethernet, like 100 base T cards, I don't think they have as good a driver support. This one that I found has a pretty classic Linux driver. It's like one of the old school 3COM 3C509 series cards. So Alpine actually has a driver package for this video chip, which is the Chips and Technologies. Actually, a whole bunch of the different Chips and Technologies chips, including the one we've got here. Oh gosh, there's a question about whether tomorrow's stream will be Halloween themed. I'll have to get back to you on that. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to configure this. I installed this driver. I think I had a different set of packages where this happened to fit in under that 48 meg limit, and I was trying to run it. It was not auto-detecting the card, which is not surprising. I was trying to figure out how to actually tell it to use a specific one, though. And then looking at the driver, it seems like, after telling it to use this specific driver, it should be able to auto-detect the model of chip at that point, since there was some code to use an ISA I/O port to probe what the chip was. But it was under a big ol' if-def ISA, which may be disabled in this build for Alpine. So I was trying to see if I could reproduce that. Reproduce the build, rather. Oh yeah, this repo is really too big to browse on here, so I grabbed a local copy of it. Anyway, new cards ready. Tuca. Beep, beep, beep. Does this Halloween lighting count as a Halloween stream? This is just with one of the desk lights off and the ring light off. Yeah, so this is the error I get when the grub modules end up past that 48 meg boundary. And Grub does not get to the point where I'm actually turning the watchdog timer off, so it has this automatic power down after, what was that, like 40 seconds or something? Yeah, attempt to read or write outside of disk. Let's find that specifically. Interesting, that could be in disk common or BIOS disk. Okay, so here's one option. It could be based on whatever this disk total sectors is coming from. Gosh, it's annoying that there are so many copies of the same message. Okay, that's interesting. So these are like kind of weird error cases. At least these first two have been. Oh, where does data cylinders come from? That might be the problem. It must be from here, right? Because I don't think Grub is going to be using LBA mode with this BIOS. I don't think this BIOS knows about LBA mode. I mean, I haven't actually checked to see if it fails LBA mode commands, but it doesn't seem to ever internally use LBA mode or have like any internal idea of how the disk would be represented in LBA. Okay. Is there no override for this? It would be convenient just to patch this, not to bounds check it. I mean, I could also patch the actual size of the disk, but I'd rather not have to have this care. I mean, my build script actually knows about the disk geometry, so I could do something where the patch includes values that are specific to my disk, but that seems like something to avoid. Okay, I'm a little worried about this total sectors. The cylinders count seems like a no-brainer. Sorry. So there might be some more checks in like nested devices like encrypted FSs. There's no option to do this that I'm missing, is there? I thought there was a command to just override like the CHS geometry, but maybe I'm thinking of syslinux. And I don't see any opportunity for that to affect this anyway, because it looks like we're doing some of these calculations right after requesting the size from the BIOS. Alright, well maybe I just remove all of those bounds checks and see if that fixes it. Okay, so I'll keep the partition check here. That seems useful. That's for very large disks, don't care. That's also for very large disks. And that is the check we don't want. Okay. Did my editor automatically clean up some trailing spaces there? Gosh, really? Can I just edit this diff? Right, I think I can just remove chunks from this diff. Okay, this all still assumes that the BIOS doesn't do its own error checking. Like, it could be the BIOS will fail this anyway. In which case, plan B is to just make a boot partition. I just don't want to waste the space on that. But the theory I'm testing here is that the BIOS doesn't even check these, it just passes them directly to the card. There's a question about why I'm back to grub debugging. It's for a different problem. I can boot Linux as long as everything is under 48 megabytes, which is where BIOS thinks the end of the disk is. But my disk is actually 64 megabytes. Did we successfully compile grub with that patch? Yeah, looks good. Yeah, okay, so the grub compile was nice and fast because everything was cached still. It's installing grub. This card ready to write. Anyone have bets on whether this will work or whether the BIOS does its own cylinder bounds checking? Just finished copying. What? I thought we didn't have that anymore. Huh. That's not what I expected. Okay. This would be a nice time to have a debugger attached to GDB, but this is earlier than I can load the GDB module. Okay, but that looks like the thing that I was trying to remove, so maybe my patch just did not apply. Yeah, that's definitely it. Okay, why did that fail? This could be a dependency issue in the grub build system. Doesn't seem, I mean, no, because then I wouldn't have seen this problem in the source code tree that I copied. What is up with this? We have one bet that BIOS is not going to do its own cylinder checking. I guess that's also implicitly what I'm betting on by doing this experiment. Of course, now I'm just failing in unrelated ways. What's going on with this? I think this is just a cache issue somewhere that I have limited patience to debug, so I'm just going to change this build step to be simpler anyway. And not do these intermediate makes. And then do one make down here. Maybe not even do this make and just do the configure. I think the configure was like more annoying than the make. The make wasn't super fast, but okay, we did the patches applied. We're doing a clean build of grub. There's a question about whether grub can't just pass Linux the values it wants Linux to see. I'm not really sure what that's about. This problem is in the interface between grub and the BIOS. The interface between grub and Linux seems to be okay at this point. There's a question about whether grub is actually a full-fledged OS or just a thing that lets you select what to boot. I mean, why not both, right? I mean, it's not as featureful as most OSs, but it's certainly valid to call grub an operating system. Like, it even has a dynamic loader and, like, a driver interface. I mean, on that note, like, EFI BIOS is certainly basically an operating system, too. Standard PC BIOS is kind of debatable. Like, theoretically, a PC BIOS could be pretty simple, but it's had so many things added to it over the years that even a non-EFI modern PC BIOS is pretty complicated. And also, not just complexity, but, like, has services that it provides to other software components via interrupt vectors and things like that. It has some of the same attributes that you'd expect to see in an operating system. It has loadable modules in the case of BIOS extensions that can be present on like adding cards. Okay, new build. There's a question about what the purpose of grub was initially. I mean, you mean what the purpose of a bootloader is, or like grub as a project? Because I mean, grub just came along to be a better bootloader. The name stands for Grand Unified Bootloader, and it was basically trying to create an architecture that was a little bit less fragmented and have one bootloader that could run on a variety of different systems and boot a variety of operating systems. It was really designed to be not Linux specific and not really kernel specific at all. Whereas before grub, the most popular bootloader most people would use on their desktop Linux machine was called Lilo for Linux Loader. And it was much simpler than grub. It didn't have a lot of support for things like file systems and I don't think Lilo knew anything about file systems. I think it booted entirely off of a block list that was saved. So it relied on knowing exactly where on the hard disk its data was, rather than knowing how to actually parse the file systems. So I mean, that's, bootloaders get more complicated because you want computers to boot in more ways. If you just want something that boots off of, one particular kind of media with, some set of devices that are pretty well established, then it doesn't have to be complicated. But if you start wanting esoteric things, even things that might seem simple, like, oh, you want to boot off of a USB stick, well, good luck with that. You need a USB driver, and you could be getting that USB driver from BIOS. Like, sometimes that works, but sometimes you actually need to bring your own USB driver. And grub gives you a lot more tools for debugging a system that's not working correctly. Like, if Lilo failed to boot, it doesn't give you a command prompt or anything. It just gives you an error message if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, you just get a different number of characters as it's printing out the string Lilo. Maybe you just get an L, or maybe you get an L and an I, and you can use that to diagnose how far along it got. You also see other bootloaders, like U-Boot is pretty popular on embedded systems. It's a bit more like grub in that it's fairly full-featured and has a lot of different modules you can load to do different things. Often bootloaders on embedded systems are especially important because you need something that can reliably boot into a number of different OS images so that you can actually upgrade a system without breaking it permanently. Oh, did we fix it? Maybe I just had a build caching issue. I was scrambling to interrupt it, but I don't need to interrupt it. I'll just let it boot. Someone's saying that Lilo had a single user mode. I mean, that wasn't Lilo, right? That was the kernel. There's a comment that there have been some interesting projects written as applications for EFI. Yeah, I mean, I believe it. I mean, most of the bootloaders people write for EFI end up needing a lot of those services, and I'm sure you could write like standalone applications. Has anyone done an EFI IRC client yet? Oh yeah, so I added a few more packages to this. I've got probably more things than I need. I tried throwing in OpenRC so that I could boot Alpine kind of normally. It's still doing a bunch of stuff that isn't going to work at all. It's got a little bit of network support because I'm tentatively planning on sticking a PC card network adapter in this thing, but I don't actually have that in my hands yet. Anyway, I think this patch works. I think the BIOS does not in fact validate any of these parameters before passing them to the card. Which makes sense. I mean, we didn't hit any errors doing the same thing. Like this same trick where I tell the BIOS I've got a 48 meg disk even though I've actually got a 64 meg disk was working fine in DOS, and it was working fine in Windows 3.1. And I'm pretty sure I was using like 50 megs of the disk in Windows 3.1 because I had MPLab installed. There's a question about what I'm using grub for. Yeah, so I'm using grub here to boot Linux. I compiled the grub and I compiled the kernel, but the user space here is regular Alpine at this point. So yeah, we're back in user mode here, and we actually have X11 binaries now. We have a whole 7 megabytes free. So I can try to run X. Where does this fail? Well, here it says no screens found. I think I get a little more info in the log file. So yeah, I did have to write a little xorg.conf for this because none of this has plug and play. Like you can't automatically detect the hardware on most of these things. And I loaded the chips and technologies driver, and it lists a bunch of chipsets that it supports. The one we've got here is the CT65550, which is I think the first member of the HiQ video family. Anyway, I think this is failing because it doesn't have ISA support, but I could be wrong about that. What else we got? I demoed this earlier, but we have at least some proof that the touchscreen hardware is giving us output, but I don't have the driver working yet. If I type minicom correctly, we can run minicom. So we set that to 2400 baud with no flow control. And we get touches. In this mode, it's only configured to report touch up and touch down, but there is a continuous reporting mode that we were using in the DOS drivers successfully. So yeah, we should eventually be able to do touchscreen. And I mean, I don't know how good this is, but this bodes well for the touchscreen cable repair. This machine had a hardware problem with the touchscreen also, where there was a bad connection in the cable, and so we did a repair several streams ago using conductive epoxy on the cable. And I think that might have worked out, although I don't want to speak too soon. So yeah, this format's documented. I found the OEM documentation and the DOS drivers and the Windows drivers. It seems like it's a fairly simple touchscreen controller that's also not trying to have like major secrets to it or anything. It just sends out these 3-byte packets, and it also has some support for saving calibration information, although you're still expected to do the calibration, like equations and everything, on your software end. So you can choose to save the calibration wherever, really. I mean, they just include the EEPROM memory as a convenience. So yeah, what else? I still have room for toys, like C-Matrix. This is the slowest I've seen C-Matrix run in a long time. This is bringing back a little bit of nostalgia from the 386 that I had running Slackware Linux when I was in high school, which was a slower machine than this. It was only a 386. It also only had 8 megs of RAM, whereas this has 32. But I did like schoolwork on that thing. I edited documents with I think I would have used Emacs if it had more memory, but I used some small editor. I think it was Joe or something like that. That was, kind of nice, but actually fit in 8 megs. And I had some weird tool that I could use to take the output of LaTeX and send it directly to my printer without actually like allocating lots of memory, because it only had the 8 megs. Yeah, fresh kernel off of kernel.org there. Alright, so there's a bunch of stuff that I could try to get working. It would be neat to get the X server working so that we could have more actual graphical output. Oh, I also installed tmux, because we gotta have tmux. Tmux takes a sec to start. There we go. Runs fast enough, though. Is that just C-Matrix starting up? Yes. Ooh, C-Matrix through tmux is a little sluggish. Look at that. tmux and C-Matrix are just sharing the CPU at this point. This machine is 66 megahertz with no floating point coprocessor. But it has a 2D graphics accelerator, so this screen is 1024 by 768. We would not have enough CPU power to drive this in a useful way without a 2D accelerator. Oh, somebody's confused about the pronunciation of LaTeX. Yeah, the X is pronounced that way. It's supposed to be a chi or whatever that is. I don't know Greek. Oh man. It is tempting to set up a PPP connection on this thing though, before I get my network card. I don't have PPPD on here. I did actually build PPP into the kernel. Yeah, the graphics chip is on VISA local bus. It's got its own RAM. It's got LCD and CRT interfaces, although I don't think there are any traces on this board for the VGA port, so if we wanted analog output, we'd have to do some wiring. But yeah, it's got a true color 1024 by 768 parallel bus headed out to this LCD. It's actually got add-on cards to convert the parallel bus to serial and then back to parallel so that they could use fewer wires, because there's a long cable between the screen and the motherboard on account of this thing being in a big foldable case. Okay, well, maybe I'll have this thing slowly run C-Matrix. I don't know if this CPU has any power management to speak of, like if it goes into low power mode when it halts, because I haven't seen a lot of variation in power usage, and I mean it's running as fast as it can right now, and draws about the same amount of power as when it's idle, which is 1.5 amps at 12 volts, most of which is for the LCD backlight. I mean, the CPU doesn't have a heatsink. Yes, slow C-Matrix. You can definitely tell that Tmux is like rebuffering stuff, like it doesn't come out in the same order as C-Matrix is trying to draw. I think C-Matrix looks better not through Tmux. I guess it's pretty similar, you just don't get the like slow top-down refresh. Okay, let's look at Alpine's build for these X11 drivers. Oh gosh, this is big repo. Okay, so here's the build script for the actual Chips and Technologies driver. It seems extremely generic. It's also interesting that, like, I was quite expecting this to be part of some large Xorg build that gets split into smaller packages during packaging, but these are actually built as separate trees. So we go to x.org, grab the individual driver and download it. There's a /configure. I assume the configuration option we're looking for is not actually part of the driver, but it's actually part of the build that would have gone into this Xorg server dev package. But it would be cool to get some confirmation about that. So I might try building this. I don't know, maybe we'll read some more package builds before building this. Like Xorg server dev would be useful. This is all X stuff, like libxi I think is X input. And then Xorg protocol. Oh, is Xorg not actually part of that main? Oh yeah, it's in community also. Got some patches. Got some CVEs. We have PCI. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an ISA option that's off by default that we actually would need to include in here. TTY there. Okay, I think that's what I actually wanted. So a container that I can keep around for a minute and then restart. Okay. I don't want to check out this entire repo. I'm just going to paste APKs into this A2Go. Oh. Hey. Yeah, it does seem like the CPU is nice and low power. I mean, it is a relatively modern 486. It's much more recent than like 486s that were made when the architecture was new. It was made relatively late as a low power embedded CPU. But then some of the other stuff on this motherboard, like the graphics chip and the Super I/O chip, are more old school designs that are not so power optimized. This thing is set up to run off batteries, though. It was intended to run off of a lead-acid pack. The idea was that you would keep the thing plugged into the wall normally, but it was required to be able to run off of battery backup in case of power failure. So it's got enough battery power to run like all day. I forget how many amp hours, but it was like, I want to say something like 8 amp hours probably. Oh yeah, the keyboard's a little weird. It's more ergonomic. I like having the two halves split apart. Hurts the hands a little less. I guess the first thing to do is just to try building this x86 video chips driver. This is on x86 64 Alpine. I don't think there's going to be a big difference here, although it does seem like if they had an ISA option at all, it would definitely be turned off for x86 64, so maybe I should be doing this on 386. Okay, now I've got a 386 build. I don't think I need the outputs from this build, but it'll be good to be on the same architecture at least. Gosh. It's like it's nice to be able to cross-compile. It's also nice to not need to. This isn't going to work because I'm going to need to install a bunch of prerequisites. Is Tuco trying to leave? Hey, what do you want? There you go. Why fail, though? Gosh. Can I attach another process to the same container? That would be handy. Oh, that literally just gave me another copy of the same console. Interesting. Oh, what is the escape key for this? Will that just exit both of them? Uh-huh. Really? Building. actually want to keep the build tree. Not quite sure what this question is about, but I think they're wondering if I'm using Alpine to build the Alpine image. Yeah, I'm just using... I was using Debian before, but it seemed to make more sense if I just had fewer distros. Okay. Source. Have ISA. I want to know if that's defined. Where do we expect to get that from? I wouldn't actually expect this to be the local /configure. I would expect it to come from the xorg dev packages. Oh. Guess it is the local configure. Fine. Okay. Okay, so it's just looking for this in xf86.h. So let's check the xorg build. xf86.h. I don't know if that comes from the X server or some other common package. Actually, I could find out what package that is, right? Xorg server dev. Okay, that's just a sub package in Xorg server then. Let's try the Xorg server build. Get some dependencies. you no wrap. I don't know how to disable truncation there, so I'm just going to give it a wider window for a sec. There's a question about the keyboard. It's not custom, it's called a Model 1 from Keyboardio, but not sponsored, it's just a thing that I have. What is font misc? Okay, I think that's all the packages I needed. Huh. Need to copy a few more files out of that. Should I just copy this whole repo? Okay. Just gonna have the whole repo here. How big is this? 380 megs of package build scripts. 23,000 files. Got a sinking feeling that I'm going to need to actually have my Docker build script do all of this, like get a copy of the aports repo and build an X server. There's a question why I'm building it inside a Docker image. Mostly it's so that I can have a nice, convenient way of like building on a set of reproducible steps while also having some caching. It's just like kind of a convenient framework for this. Completely optional, like I could just use a shell script and some chroots and whatever. Okay, actually I want to know where this is. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually not even in the source tree anymore. Yeah, we might have to go to an earlier version of Xorg if they removed ISA support entirely. Oh, maybe I should stick to released files. Just try kind of bisecting it and see when this disappeared. Okay, so first step is let's see if they dropped ISA when moving from X386 to Xorg. So Xorg server 1.0.1. Let's grab some history here. So just for a quick recap, I'm trying to get graphics working on here. There exists an Xorg driver. It's even still in the Alpine repo, but as far as I can tell, the actual driver that you can download only supports PCI and not ISA. And Visa Local Bus is basically a flavor of ISA. So we need ISA support. And the way that seems to work is that the actual video driver, during its build, it checks for this XF86 config ISA entity symbol, which seems to have been removed from the current source trees. There's an analogous symbol here for PCI, which we can find all over the place still. So we don't have to go all the way back to X386 proper. We can stay in Xorg. At some point they actually removed ISA. Just make sure this is actually here and not just a reference to something that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, we have the symbol. This one walks the dog. Alright. So I guess we bisect. That was 2006. And where are we now? It looks like they changed the numbering scheme here. I don't know what that was about. So current releases are 21. I guess they just switched to a year-based thing or something. I don't know. Don't care that much. Before 21 dot whatever, it was 1.20. I think 1.20 is what we were just building over here. Yeah. .20.13 is what we were just building. Alright, well I guess I'll just stick a pin in the middle or so and check out 1.10. Does anybody remember svgalib? We could totally run svgalib. It would be a bad idea, but we could probably do it on this machine. Oh, there was a question about ISA. ISA is kind of a backronym, really. I mean, not a backronym. It's an acronym that was eventually added to describe the bus that all the original IBM PCs had. So originally, there was an IBM PC with an x86 CPU, and they just kind of brought the CPU's bus out to some slots and had an expansion connector, right? And that eventually got called the ISA bus, as someone attempted to name it an industry standard, so industry standard architecture. But really it's just the way that you plugged things into computers before PCI. There were some things between PCI and ISA, like VISA Local Bus, which is what we've got here for the video adapter. There were also some other ill-fated standards like microchannel, which was this weird thing IBM was trying to push. Oh, interesting. By 1.10, we have some mentions in the design documents, but not in the code. Interesting. So we've got to go older than 1.10. Let's grab 1.5. Oh yeah, someone's got some nostalgic vitriol here for MCA and the configuration floppy disk thing that it did. Yeah, I never saw that firsthand, but I've certainly heard that it was pretty awful. I think I only ever saw one MCA machine, and it was a PS2 that someone at one of the schools I went to had. I never saw the inside of it, if I remember right, though. I just I was just like in the room when somebody was using it. Two goes back. Tuco. Hey. Oh, you taking that chair? Uh-huh. Oops. Do you think C Matrix is getting slower, or is it just me? At this point, I don't know if we're going to want to compile Xorg just kind of without the Alpine build system, or whether we should start with these APK build files. It kind of depends on how different things are once we go back to an old enough version. Or should I just take Tuco's seat if he's taking mine? I think we can get some good cat noises here. feel like there's going to be a lot of compiling in our future to make this system a little more usable. So it looks like for sure I'm going to need to compile my own Xorg server package and the drivers that go with it. I might also need to compile my own version of that input attach utility. I was showing earlier that it seems like I've got the driver for the touchscreen and the user mode tool that goes with that driver, but the user mode tool seems to be missing support for this particular touchscreen model. It's like kind of tempting just to do like old school Linux stuff on it though, like SSH into things and run links. I could stick a serial console on my Raspberry Pi and use Minicom. Can I just run a Getty like that? Why you no connect? Oh, wrong serial port. Why do I even have a TTYS3? that's better. It's not gonna work though. Oh, that's relative to the dev directory? Really? Oh, there we go. You know what? I don't even think this account has a password. That might be a problem. Oh, yeah. So now we have this acting as a terminal for the Raspberry Pi with 100 gigabytes free. Similar speed over 100 kilobaud serial, huh? Oh, is this buffer all full? Oh, actually, I don't know if Control-C works right now. I don't know if the buffer is full or if Control-C is not set up. I can kill this from a different terminal, though. Oh. That's interesting. As soon as I killed it, it started playing much smoother. Like maybe there is some kind of timing issue on the send side, and now that there's just a bunch of stuff in the buffer. Somebody's got a very large pipe buffer, which is now playing out at 100 kilobaud. Is Minicom responding at this point? Yeah, Minicom is responding. It's just the serial buffer. Interesting. I could actually reset Minicom. There we go. How about... technically it's browsing the web from the voting machine, right? If I'm using a serial terminal to run elinks. Oh. Kernels. Right, it would be more fun to run links locally. Could try installing pppd. This is all to distract from how I think the next step in getting graphics working is to do a bunch of really annoying Xorg archaeological compilation. I don't know what to do if Tuco is gonna take my chair. Well, it'd be nice to at least figure out what version of Xorg to use before putting this away for the night, right? Tuco. There's an important comment from chat that voting machine bad. Yes, for sure. This is much more useful as a weird Linux machine than as a voting machine. Okay, so 1.5 is fine. So we're looking for something between 1.5 and 1.10. It's like a little bit tempting to try Browsh, the more modern Firefox-based browser. I have a feeling that would run pretty badly on here. It's kind of amusing to see how it breaks, though. By default, it uses like Unicode box drawing characters and stuff that would not. I don't know. Linux might actually convert those to like BIOS font characters. Now I'm actually kind of curious. Do I have that? Okay, here's a control. Here's it running on my local machine. Oh, that's weird. This message went out over to this TTY. It's very interesting. I think this probably has something to do with like the controlling TTY or something for the Getty. Normally this runs from a init, it's not usual that you would run a Getty from a regular shell. This is probably why. In this case, it's not actually bad. How did that not work? Oh yeah, cool. Slightly convenient. So at this point, I'm just SSHing through the Raspberry Pi, but then browsh is running on not the machine we've been using, but the one that I had been running most of my demos on before, the Linux VM on Proxmox. So it's slow like you'd expect, but also it definitely doesn't know about the box drawing characters here. Or actually, I guess the character is right. It's the color that doesn't work. Yeah, so I think actually this is better than I thought. It looks like the character is right. The terminal is sized wrong, but I'm sure I could fix that with STTY. And it doesn't support the arbitrary RGB coloration that browsh requests, because VGA does not do that. VGA has a 16 color palette that we're using. Oh gosh, it updates really slowly. Yeah, I mean, I guess I am technically running Firefox on the voting machine, sort of. I mean, no, I'm not, because Firefox itself is running on a different computer. But, and it's completely unusable. I don't even know how you exit this. I think you exit this by killing the Docker from a different terminal. I didn't even reset the terminal successfully. Does this mean my Mac Mini is a mainframe now? It's running virtual machines. I'm connecting to it from a terminal. Tuco is distracting. All right. Gosh, it's like the temptation to try out svga lib is nagging on me a little bit, but I suspect to make that work, I would either have to compile everything from scratch or just use an ancient Linux distro. Does this help if I set term? No. It could be that minicom is intercepting. Oh, wait. Oh, that's interesting. Setting term equals Linux, reset it fully. So that must have been something that wasn't part of the VT102 reset. I still don't have a blinking cursor, which is interesting. Oh no, DOSBox is trying to use its ASCII art renderer. It's not going to work. That's trying to be the DOSBox logo. Should we just download a bunch of versions of Xorg now? I guess we can keep bisecting it. Let's grab 1.3. B to MIDI port, yes. Enough of that. Oh, serial line. Tuke. On the edge of my seat here, thanks to Tuco. Okay, 1.3 seems to have ISA support still. Why does this go from 1.3.99.2 to 1.4.0.90? These version numbers tell a desperate story. Okay. Looks to be there in 1.4.0.90. Let's try 1.4.99. Seems like maybe the deletion happened in 1.5. Oh man, local C matrix, no serial line involved. Much faster. Yeah. Oh, no, I guess I may remember that wrong. 1.5 did have... I was on the wrong side of that. Sigh. Okay, so it's between 1.5 and 10. Is that what we've got? Bisecting only works if you actually remember the results correctly. X server 1.7.5.901, another wonderful version number. No ISA in here except for in the documentation. This hung out in the design documents for a while after it was actually removed from the code. Grab 1.6.0. Not in 1.6.0. Interesting. Ooh, they removed it during 1.5. You remove an entire bus, like in a minor revision, really? Seems to be in 1.5.3. So maybe 1.5.99 was it? We could try to look for the specific change in Git, maybe. Were they using Git at this point? Does this XF86 helper file even still exist? It does. What is the version control situation anyway? There it is, remove ISA support. Oh wow, they're being mean about it too. I'm supposed to get the kernel to expose a frame buffer device because that's all you need for any kind of graphics. Man. Operating system developers in general really like to misunderstand the scope of graphics. See, now I'm wondering how much of this came from like x86 or x486 developers and how much of this was from kernel developers. I'm sure there was politics happening. There's always politics about all of the software because software is basically just congealed politics. Clearly I should patch this back in. I'm sure that would be a giant pain. So, I wonder if I doubt any packages we could find would be applicable to the situation because I want something that works on a recent Alpine, but that uses an ancient Xorg at this point. Hmm. 5.3. I'm just going to try changing the version in this Xorg build and see where it fails. I'm sure a bunch of things will fail. How do you regenerate checksums on these? Yeah, so the first failure is that it doesn't even have the XZ archive. It only has bzip and gzip archives. Oh man, I don't know if this is the thing to be doing right at this moment. So maybe this is a good time to wrap up the stream, and then I can do a little bit of this off stream and come back with something less uninteresting than just trying to get Xorg to compile. You're gonna give me my chair back. Hmm. I guess let's just make another image in this Docker file for building X stuff. You want out there now, Took? Do we use recent versions of the dependency libraries when possible? Xorg server common. Do we really need stuff like Mesa and PCI access? What is libepoxy anyway? More OpenGL stuff. Nope. Huh. That's new. Man, Adam is ready to be done with this too. It's just decided not to render anything in this window. Oh, who needs editors that aren't Vim? Alright. Oh man, I don't think I've ever built Xorg. It certainly has a interesting build system. Where's the rest of my window? Does it not have docs on how you install it? Building the whole graphic stack. Build dependencies, PCI access. We don't have PCI. Okay, maybe that meson stuff is optional because these instructions are using regular old autoconf. Yeah, it's possible a regular build here is simpler than whatever the Alpine package was doing. I don't think there was an option for enabling ISA. I think the key here is not a config option, but to use an old enough version of Xorg. Let's just see what a default configure does. I don't have to be in the dark anymore. I just had that set to avoid glare on the LCD. Does Xorg require OpenGL at this point? Like, oh, this might work. I think I'm just going to disable all the 3D acceleration related stuff because we have no 3D acceleration. Oh. Export. I don't know how much we care about X fonts here. What is X font? libxfont dev. Yeah, this is just going to be an kind of annoying iterative process of trying to get this build to work. Okay, can we disable PCI? No? Hmm. Pearl. Interesting. Tuco's back. Hey. Hey. You want to do something fun? Like what? You want to walk outside? Oh, we did a config. Thought there'd be more options than that. Oh, there was a question about what kind of critter Tuco is. Tuco is he's a regular cat. But he's, I mean, there's nothing regular about him, but he's a kind of a mix of Bengal and American curl, from what I hear. So he has some interesting characteristics, and he's got the polydactyl fingers. Ugh. Panoramics. What even was that? I feel like it's been a while since I saw this. Like maybe it's deprecated. Oh, this is in libzinorama. Oh, that still exists. Okay. I thought that had been deprecated for some reason. Yeah, I don't think this is going to work mixing and matching versions like this. Like right now I'm trying to build Xorg server from this fairly old version and using basically all the dependencies from current Alpine, and this is not happening because I think some of these fundamental data types have changed. So I'm just gonna have to learn how to compile this all properly. Probably just reading the wiki and following the wiki and putting that in Docker. So I'm going to wrap this up for today, but thanks so much for stopping by. I hope that was interesting. And say hi to your local kittens and or cats and or humans. If you have a kitty you like in your life, give them a treat and a hug. I'll see you next time.